Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Zermatt here again from ZimdogTuning. So thanks for a great response from the last video, the first part in the Daytona series, a three-part series, and obviously this is the second part that we're going to dive into now. This one's all about driving consistently. This is a 24-hour race. How are we going to get to the end of it consistently without crashing and all that sort of thing? First, consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps get this sort of content out to more and more people. Give it a like, and potentially from what we're going to be talking about today, comment and let's start a bit of a discussion in the comments box. See what other people are thinking, because today is all about learning, practicing, scheduling, practicing, and at the end of the day, everyone is different. So everyone learns in a different way. First, a bit more sort of background about me. I've got a master's in sports performance analysis with a focus on that elite performance area, a lot of psychology, and as you know, I've been competing in Forza RC at a professional level for a number of years now. So I've got first-hand knowledge of this, both driving and from a coaching perspective. So I wanted to share a few of those sort of insights and how some of those successes have come about. So there's a list of areas which I think a driver should focus on, or a coach should get a driver to focus on from a sort of performance point of view when preparing for a race like the Daytona 24 hours. And those five are a length and frequency of practice sessions, those session aims, how you train, so not just the aim of the session, but how you go about the session, finding braking zones, not points. Talked about that briefly in the previous video. And then finding the best approach for each driver or yourself. I'm very different from some of the people that I help coach. They're very different from each other. We have to find a solution which both works individually and as a team. So let's tackle that first one, then length and frequency of practice. You may have heard an old average set, 1,000 hours until you become, or 10,000 hours till you become a professional. The first step to that is doing 1,000 hours. That may be very true on a game, but I think when we're focusing in on a specific event like that, the frequency and sort of length of practice sessions has got to be designed for this specific event. So my first thought on this is to run practice sessions frequently, but don't burn yourself out. There's no point in practicing when you're burnt out, when you're not focused. These sessions have got to be targeted. They've got to be enjoyable, and they've got to be short enough that you can want to do many of them, but they're going to be long enough that you're actually reaping some of the rewards from them. So I'd say about a pit stop maybe, and that's quite a good break in my eyes, because you can use pit stops as a mental reset in these races. You're going to have multiple pit stops. In these higher powered cars, you could be doing 5 or 6 pit stops in over the 2-hour sort of stint that you're going to be doing, and then across the whole 24 hours if you're doing 3, 4, 5 stints, you're going to need those mental resets, because at some point you're going to make a mistake. Hopefully by taking on some of these tips potentially that they might work for you, we're going to minimize the amount of mistakes that are made, and hopefully we're going to obviously increase the speed of your driving consistently. So you need a plan for each session, about a pit stop's length, a session sort of length. Get the fuel low, get the tyres a little bit warm, and that's what we're going to be focusing. The other thing is you need an aim for your practice session. Okay, so there's no point just going in and just driving around willy-nilly. Okay, you're just going to be bored. You're going to be why am I doing this? You need to focus what you're doing for each session, and you could set out at the beginning of the day and go, right, I'm going to run 5 sessions today, and they're all going to be a pit stop length, so maybe you'll be doing 2 hours of driving overall. But each of those is going to have a specific target, and that target is going to be achievable and all those sorts of things. Okay, so I don't want to go down the science of this too much, but there's a lot of research on how to learn, how to get consistent, and the main one that sort of sticks in me, especially from my degree, but from a little bit of reading I've been doing, is the schema theory. And if you think about throwing a basketball, and this may seem like a strange analogy to bring into a driving game, but throwing a basketball into a hoop. Think of how many times the professional basketball player, take the free throw for example. He's going to practice that before they can nail it every time. It's a set skill, which is slightly different from what we're doing. But you know, he may overthrow it, underthrow it, throw it to the left, throw it to the right, whatever it may be. But each time he performs that act, is building up a schema, is building up a scheme of work, if you like, in his brain, saying, oh, okay, that went a little bit further that time, so I'm going to compensate for that. And this is where overcompensation and that sort of thing comes into play. But each time he builds something up, whether it's in, to the left, to the right, underneath, over the top, you know, backwards, whatever it may be, building up a picture of what he did compared with the outcome. And that's what you need to be doing for each of one of these corners, and that's how you build accuracy in your driving. So even if you outbrake yourself into a corner, you'll know, right, okay, I broke at this point now, this time, I've outbraked myself. You can, you know, say that to yourself to reinforce that, but your brain is going to be remembering that. So obviously the more laps you do, the more focused laps that you do, you're going to be building up a more and more accurate sort of picture of how your brain can look at this corner, look at the braking point, look at how you accelerate, and it will become more and more natural. But like I said, those practice sessions have got to be targeted. It's focused learning we're talking about here. So the other thing with targeted and focused sort of sessions is train as you intend to play, is the sort of buzzwords that go very wide. There's no point driving around, like I said, aimlessly. There's no point driving around off the pace. There's no point making a mistake in a lap and then giving up for the rest of the lap, because that's not what you're going to be doing in the race. You know, you're going to be making a mistake and then you're going to be 2 or 3 seconds behind the guy in front, or the guy behind would have caught you up considerably, and you've got to get straight back on the pace. So I advise you to, each time you make one of those mistakes, because everyone does it, I'm doing it right now, you know, get back on, get back in the chair if you like, and drive harder than you have before. So you gain that time back. It's what you do in the race. You wouldn't just give up, probably, hopefully not. So you know, that's a train as you intend to drive in this situation. So why am I talking about this? What are the specifics to driving then? We need to build up a picture of each corner, of each lap, of each track, all that sort of thing to in our brain to help cope with these pressure situations, because the more focused, the more detailed that schema is, the easier you're going to be able to tap into it under pressure. Specifics to driving then, you know, we talked about braking zones rather than points. You need to learn to drive near the limit but not on it to begin with. It's much better to run, say, 15 laps, maybe 0.2 of a second off your best time than 15 laps at your best, and then, you know, on the final corner you spin, collide with 8 cars, you destroy your race, their race, all that sort of thing. It's much better to be a consistent driver. You're going to be easier in the race as well. The slower cars and the faster cars are going to know what you're doing. There's all sorts of positives to becoming that sort of metronomic, consistent driver. So I actually want to put something up on the screen now that I did 3 practice sessions, and I want to iterate to you guys how that helped me in my driving. So what we're looking at here is a graph of all the laps that I did in those 3 practice sessions. So I did 15, including the out lap, and as you can see, session 1, the average 93, so 1 minute 33.474, and that decreased each session I did. But there's a few other things I wanted to point out, and I urge you to do a similar exercise to this, because actually it was really interesting. The first thing is, look at around lap 7, 8 on the graph. I always seem to have a slower lap around lap 7 or 8, so that's something I really need to sort of focus on, because we're losing, well, best part of a second in session 1, sort of half a second session 2, and then sort of 7, 8 tenths session 3 on the lap afterwards. So really something to focus on is actually, do I start to lose concentration around that time? So something interesting to, you know, to see if you have a similar experience to this. The next thing I wanted to point out was actually, even though I did 3 sessions, and you'd think that, well, from the average, my times have got better as the sessions have gone on. My fastest lap was actually in session 2, which I found interesting, as I didn't personally feel as comfortable driving in session 2, and but it seems to me like I had a sort of a bit of a golden period for lap 11, 12 and 13, where I was in and around that sort of 93 dead, high 92s. section which I had in session 1 as well, but right at the end, and I had well, I guess a similar golden period, if you like, on that 13, 14 and 15 in session 3, but overall I was more consistent. I managed to decrease the first lap time on the third session, which was sort of a key aim of mine. So these averages are lap 2 to 15 to get sort of an easier representative. So what did I actually take out of these sessions? What was the point in them? I think from the first one you could see that graph going up and down. It was to stop making silly mistakes. I wanted to focus on my braking points further, and even if I wasn't driving my absolute limit on the fastest I could, I wanted to get those lap times more consistent, which is what I ended up doing in session 2, which is really good to see. The next, what I took from session 2 though was I need to take a risk to get that first lap time down. You can see it was best part of 4/10 quicker in session 3, and that's really important. That's practicing out laps, that's practicing, it's not a standing start in this race, but if it was, practicing the first corner braking zone, that sort of thing. And from the third session I took that consistency is good, but actually what I found in about 5 or 6 of the laps I was hitting the bump coming out of the second proper corner, the right-hander that we talked about previously, and I need to avoid that. And I think the next thing to sort of focus on is to add what I was talking about, exiting the pits, practicing out laps, and also look into doing this in the night time as well to see how consistent I am in both, and maybe that can inform your team whether you're a good nighttime driver or not. Just from your overall fastest lap, there's not really much you can tell from that, other than obviously how you're going to do in qualifying, which is important, but probably only going to inform a couple of sessions of practice, and it's also only going to affect the first stint or two in a 12 stint race. So it's not the bulk of activity. It's useful obviously, and it's a team-based exercise, but I think more focus should be on the actual race, because that's where you can really knuckle down and make a difference for your team. Like we said, become that metronomic, consistent driver. And alright, so how do you go about that then? We talked around in the introduction braking zones rather than points, and people might be going, hang on a minute, surely if you're going as fast as you can go, you just want to brake at the same point every lap, and then you're going to be entering the corner at the same speed every lap. It's going to be perfect. It's all going to be fine. Now, I don't know about you. I certainly can't do it. I certainly can't brake at exactly the same spot every lap, even if I'm aiming for it, and then I can't brake at the same sort of pressure, or sometimes there are other factors that are affecting things that means I don't stop as well. I might clip some grass, or however it is. You need to build some leniency into the way you're driving to drive consistency. No one, apart from maybe a few select people on the game, can drive at the absolute limit all race. It's just, I mean, for a 2-hour stint it would be absolutely absurd if that's the case. So you need to find a way that's, like I mentioned earlier, a couple of tenths off your sort of pace, and then find that consistent sort of rhythm and go for it. So we talked briefly in the other video about coming into the chicane that we've just been around, with how that sign, the Daytona sign on the right hand side, was the braking zone rather than the point, and how we've got a white line which is the braking point, which is a nice reference. And it's all about gaining as many references as you can, and then picking the reference that works for you. So coming into this first corner is notoriously difficult. As you see, I'll run so wide there and get a little bit of penalty, but we end up gaining back a lot of the time by taking a slightly different line, a bit more speed coming into the apex. But it's all about having a zone where actually if I brake anywhere in this zone, I'm going to make the corner somehow, and then you need to adjust where you are in that zone depending on how you're feeling. It could be anything from you're feeling nervous, you're in a heat of a battle, you're defending from someone, you're trying to attack someone, you're chasing someone down. You need to be able to adjust where you are in that zone. I suggest having about a car and a half, maybe a car's length for that zone. Doesn't seem like a lot, but actually if you park your car on the track and see how many cones or how many white lines or whatever it takes up, it's quite a big area to make adjustments from. And from that you can then start to build speed into your laps. So that, talking about the schema theory again, last lap I braked at this point and I went too deep into the corner, or I braked at that point and I cut the corner like we've just done in there. Although it's Toro clean, as someone pointed out, you can go over a lot of those curves. It's all about building up that picture of the track and being able to hit those braking zones consistently, and then being able to adjust in the braking phase. So, I'm coming in too slowly here, I'll let off and take a slightly different line around this corner, which I know is potentially slightly slower overall, but actually for where we started braking, it's the best outcome to be able to make that call early and then adjust from it. So, and that's really key when you're racing with someone as well, side by side. If you're next to someone and they brake slightly earlier, you can really enforce your position by, you know, letting off the brakes slightly or braking slightly lighter to really take command of that position or that situation on the track. So it's slightly different from hot lapping, where obviously you've got a finite sort of braking point that you want to hit, and if you don't hit that, then your lap is ruined. That's not what we're about. It's not a hot lap challenge, it's a 24-hour race, and that's really what we're aiming to build in, is that consistency. And that's going into the corner. Coming out of the corner, talked about it last time, but you have two options. You need to either abuse the traction setting, and then that means you need to be absolutely perfect with your turning a lot of the time coming out the corners, or you can take the sort of slightly less risky approach of not abusing that traction. Getting in, you know, getting out of the corner slightly slower but slightly more consistently, I think is the way forward. Some people may disagree. Let me know what you think below. But it's definitely something to consider in the whole sort of consistency versus speed battle. So I don't want to go into too much more detail really, because I could talk about the science of things and how I approach the psychology of a race like this for hours and hours, and do comment and sort of let me know if you want me to go into more detail on certain things. I'm very happy to do that. But a quick recap thing then: length and frequency of practice sessions, they need to be focused. You need to have a session aim, whether it's I'm going to conquer the first corner for 12 out of the 15 laps, or I'm going to make sure my first lap, as I go over that bump, I'm going to make sure my first lap is perfect, or I'm going to nail the braking on this corner, I'm going to the third corner every lap in this session. I don't care how the rest of the lap goes, but I'm going to do that. You start to build the picture up. Train as you intend to drive, train as you intend to play. If you make a mistake, don't just give up on that lap and cruise around in 6th gear down the straight at 80 miles an hour like you're on the motorway. Get straight back onto the racing line. It's as if it were a race. Treat it like you're in the middle of the 24 hours, because when or if that situation happens in the race, you're ready and you know exactly what to do, and you can have that mental reset that we talked about, and then you're back on the attack and you're trying to gain time for your team, because every second counts, especially in the midfield in these longer races. It is so tight, so every second really does count. Braking zones, not points, we just talked about. Don't want to go over it too much, but have a zone where you know you're going to make the corner if you brake there. Don't push yourselves in these longer races. It's all about consistency, and then finding the best approach for you. This is just my approach. This is something that I found works for me and has done for a few other people. I know there's some very different styles out there about turning the braking line on, turning it off, doing hours and hours and hours of practice before they get better, and not giving up in a session, practicing without fuel and tyres on to start with and then switching them on. There's a lot of different ways, and I'm really intrigued to see how you sort of tackle preparing for this sort of race yourself. So do let me know. I'm actually really interested to see if there's something I can improve on. I might be making the video, but it's never too late to learn. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to put in that focused practice, find the best approach for you, and make it work really for a big race like this. Guys, if you've got this far, then thanks very much. I appreciate it. It's a rambly video. There's a graph in the middle of it, which I know some people love, but some people hate. So let me know how you think. But actually, I wanted to sign off there. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and along with it the bell icon, because that means you'll get a notification each time I post something like this. And this is the second in a series of 3. I'm actually going to be doing a live stream of my first stint of the race as well, so you can see exactly how my practice has been put into play. although I won't be driving this Daytona prototype, which is a shame, because I really like this car. It's really enjoyable to drive. I'll be in a GT car. But yeah, make sure you subscribe if you like the video. If you did enjoy the video, then hit the like button. It's a simple move. It really helps sort of get the channel and put content out to more and more people to help improve their driving at the end of the day, which is what this is all about. I really enjoy making this sort of content. So do subscribe and like, and I'll see you guys next time.